Good afternoon. I'm Commander Anna Kahn, Associate Director for Communication with the Division of Environmental Health Science and Practice in the National Center for Environmental Health at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. I'd like to welcome you to today's Nexus webinar on National Environmental Public Health Tracking, Better Information for Better Health. All participants joining us today are in listen-only mode. Closed captions are available for this webinar. Next slide. Today's Nexus webinar will be available to view on demand in a few days after the live webinar. You can find the video recording of today's webinar at CDC's Nexus webpage at the link displayed on this slide. Next slide, please. After the presentation, there will be a Q&A session. You may submit questions at this time during today's presentation. To ask questions using Zoom, click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Then type in your question in the Q&A box. Next slide, please. I would now like to welcome our presenters for today's Nexus webinar. We're pleased to have with us Patrick Wall. Mr. Wall earned his BS in computer science from the University of Georgia and began his career in 1996 as the lead information technologist with CDC's Radiation Studies branch. In this position, he managed a group of IT resources and led scientific development projects. In 2000, he joined CDC's Strategic National Stockpile as the knowledge management team lead, where he led information technology development programs and projects. In 2002, he joined CDC's Environmental Health Tracking branch and currently works on informatics activities related to the enhancement of the Environmental Public Health Tracking Network. We would also like to welcome our second presenter for today's webinar, Shannon DeWitt. Mr. DeWitt currently serves as the Security Steward and Application Development Lead for CDC's National Environmental Public Health Tracking Program. Mr. DeWitt graduated from Jacksonville State University with a BS in Computer Science, is a Microsoft Certified System Engineer, and has over 25 years of experience in information technology, with the last 20 years focused on public health at CDC. I'll now turn it over to Mr. Wall. Mr. Wall, please proceed.
Thank you so much, Anna, and thank you everyone for being here. We really appreciate you allowing us to come on and share our work. In today's presentation, I'm going to be going over some introductory information about tracking and the tracking network. We'll have a couple of demonstrations on pieces and parts of the tracking network. We're talking about tracking, how tracking in action has been implemented, and also go over some resources for preparedness and response. And Anna mentioned we also have a Q&A at the end. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. The Environmental Health Tracking Program was funded by Congress because of a critical knowledge gap hindering efforts to reduce or eliminate diseases that may be prevented by managing environmental factors. Where data did exist, there were often no standards or synchronization in collection. Data often were not analyzed or interpreted to inform action, and data was not typically released to the public. Working with partners across states, cities, and other parts of CDC and the federal government, the tracking program's goal is to increase the number of data-driven environmental public health actions and decisions by providing information from a nationwide network of standardized and integrated health and environmental data. Next slide, please. The Environmental Public Health Tracking Program consists of CDC and a host of partners, including state and local health departments, federal partners, national organizations, and other key groups. Our 26 recipient health departments are funded to build and implement local tracking programs and data networks. Like CDC tracking, they develop data tools, applications, and products to inform public health action in their areas. To help extend tracking's reach, we work with the Association of State and Territorial Health Officials to help unfunded health departments participate in program activities like submitting data or participating in tracking work groups. Our partnerships are really vital to the tracking program. They support our ability to build a sustainable tracking network, to enhance environmental public health tracking workforce and infrastructure, to disseminate information, to guide policy, practice, and other actions to improve the nation's health, to advance environmental public health science and research, and finally, to foster collaboration among public health and environmental programs. Next slide, please. The tracking program also develops and maintains the National Environmental Health Tracking Network. In just a moment, my colleague Shannon will demonstrate the various components of this web-based, publicly available system hosted here at CDC. This slide highlights the different sources of environmental hazard, exposure, health effect, and population characteristics data that we currently include on the tracking network so that people can quickly and easily access that information from one location. These topic areas are selected based on factors such as availability and applicability of existing data. And we work closely with our national partners at the CDC, EPA, NASA, and NOAA to obtain national level data. If national level data are not available, then we work with our funded partners at the state and local levels to obtain data. Where possible, all these data are standardized so that they can be compared over time and space. Next slide, please. Tracking serves up data and information that meet different needs and inform decision-making at local, state, and national levels. Our efforts in building the system centered around the concepts of open data and providing as much context around the data as possible. Our flagship product is the National Environmental Public Health Tracking Network, a web-based, multi-tiered system of data tools and services, and it offers unique data, offers beautiful visualizations, interactive tools, excuse me, and contextual information. You can access our data in a variety of ways, from our Data Explorer, topic-specific dashboards, and information by location. If someone needs to use or visualize things differently, it's really no problem. All of tracking's data is available via an open application programming interface, which allows users to create their own application and visualizations. You can also view state and local tracking program websites to explore data, tools, and resources that are important to their communities. You will see most of these features during the tracking network demonstration in just a few minutes. Next slide, please. The application programming interface I mentioned earlier, or API for short, is a powerful tool, but we also have focused on providing other simple ways of sharing. Of course, there's the old school data download option, and there's the ability to share links to saved queries in Tracking's Data Explorer. But we have also recently added the ability to easily share full-featured interactive visualizations that can easily be embedded into any website. Next slide, please. Now that you've heard a little bit about the tracking network, let's take a tour. I'd like to hand things over to my colleague, Shannon DeWitt, who will demonstrate some of the things I've mentioned here.
Great, thanks, Patrick. Hold on, let me go ahead and share my screen here. And just make sure, Patrick, can you confirm you're seeing the tracking page?
Yep, that looks great.
Wonderful. Thanks, Patrick. So I'm excited to show off a lot of the features and content that Patrick mentioned earlier. As Patrick said, we have the Public Health Tracking Network, which contains all this wonderful data that we have available. This is the CDC landing page for the tracking network. And from here, you can dive into information about the topics that we collect. And you saw that list on Patrick's slide. Here you can get a little bit deeper and learn a lot more about those different topic areas. Or if you want to see the success stories that we've had with our grantees and other partners, we have a list of those also from this page. Lots of content, information to dig into, but that's not what I'm here to show you. I'm excited to show off the actual tracking network. So I'm going to jump in to visit the tracking network here. which lands you on our tracking network page. And from here, we can dive into all the tools that Patrick mentioned, from our API that feeds our data to all of our components and to everything outside that's using the tracking network, into some of our new dashboards, which I'll be showing later in the presentation. So from this page, we're actually going to click on this big yellow button that says access the new Data Explorer. Data Explorer is our primary visualization tool for looking at data on the tracking network. The program works across any platform, any browser, is also available on mobile. You'll find some features look a little bit different as you move to mobile or tablet devices, depending on the screen size. It accommodates for those various screen size and gives you another way of looking at that data on those devices. Go ahead and refresh that. I've never saw it pause. There we go. Just me, just today. So as soon as we launch the Data Explorer, it's going to drop us into what we call our query panel. This is where we select the data that we're actually looking to display. And we've actually broken that data up into contents, indicators, and measures. And we do that because we have 2.4 million rows of data out in the tracking network. And that's about 600 measures available in the public portal. So in this area, if I were to have a drop down with 600 measures, it's almost inconceivable to be able to find the data that we're looking for. Additional features are being added to this that actually will be available as soon as next week that allows you to search the data based on keywords and topics. Although we're looking at our production set now, you don't see those search features, but they're actually being added next week. So we're just going to use the drop downs to find what you're looking for. I'm going to go ahead and drop down. We're going to pick something I know we've got complete coverage in. I'll pick populations and vulnerabilities. And from here, I'm going to choose, let's see here, demographic data. And we'll look at percent of population age 5 years and over that speak English less than very well. So some very specific population information here that we could dig into. Next step is our geography type. We have 12 different geography types available to display. Different measures may have different geography types, everything from state, county, census tract, and then we even go smaller than census tract with some of our 5K and 20K resolution data. So when I drop this down, I actually can see what data is available for this particular measure, what geography level. We'll go ahead and pick national by county. That'll give us a complete national picture. Nothing to select in geography, so it moves us to time. All years that we have available will show up here, and we can simply select all years. And if additional advanced options are available, they'll show here. For instance, this may stop and ask us what age, sex, race, ethnicity, or if you're getting into environmental data, it may stop and ask what pollutants, what different information are you trying to query. In this case, there's nothing, so we can just hit go. And now when we hit go, it's actually reaching back to that API that Patrick mentioned earlier and grabbing the data, that same public API that's available for anyone, and bringing it back and displaying that data. The very first thing we always show is a map because we think that visualization look of a map allows us to really quickly look at the data. And if we look at our map here, we're seeing that the map actually is done so that we have a chloropleth of colors on the map. They're broken into 5 break groups. Those break groups are easily configurable, but by default, most measures will build that break group based on all the data that you've queried. So since we queried across these 10-ish years, then we're going to get a legend based on all 10 years of data. That allows me to change the year and keep that same ranges in our legend. So the maps are comparable across space and time as we look at the data. From here, we've got basic functionality. For instance, we can zoom in, we can pick a particular area and look at it closely. And notice when I zoom in, it draws the boundaries around the counties that we've selected. We can also customize what we're looking at. For instance, I can choose this little hamburger menu at the top. And from here, I can change, for instance, information that might be important. I could change the transparency level of those chloroplasts so I can see the picture better of what I'm looking at. I could add points of interest later. For instance, maybe it's interesting to look at Superfund sites. And so I'm going to go ahead and pick Superfund sites. And notice it drops red dots all over the map. I'll show you those in a second. Or I could change the map background. So if I'm looking at a particular map background, let's back up here. Maybe it would be important not to look at this version, but to look at something that might be imagery. And so it'll redraw the map based on any background that we pick. Now, those red dots are important because I selected Superfund. So these are points of interest. They're actually pulled from the Highfield, which is the Homeland Security data. So we're not keeping up with these points of interest. We're real-time connecting to another data source and adding these to this map. And if I click on any of these, then I get a pop-up that tells exactly what it is, along with a link to the EPA facility report for that particular item. And so that one may not be linked, but most of them are, being able to take us to those facility reports. And so I could click on that, get additional information about that facility report. What else can we do with the map? We actually can go here to our second option, which is our legend, and we can change that legend. For instance, I told you it was built on 5 break groups based on the data. Maybe we want it on 7 break groups. And you notice it's spinning because it's connecting to our API, looking at all the data and building a new legend based on that information. We can also change the color scheme. So let's say we want it in a different color scheme. We could pick greens, we could pick blues, whatever we want. We could change the color scheme to be anything that we're actually looking to pick. We'll go back to a blue here. And we can also change from, we're currently in quantiles, we could pick equal intervals or natural breaks. It'll rebuild the legend based on those particular options. So now that we've got this data and we've got this beautiful map, what can we do with it? Well, as Patrick mentioned earlier, we have all kinds of ways of looking and sharing this data. He mentioned just being able to share a URL. Sure, we can do that. This option up here at the very front says share. If I click on that, there's actually this very first link here is a link to your shared query. So I can copy that information. I could send it in an email, or I could paste it into a browser, and you'll notice it'll open the Data Explorer. It'll go through all the options we just selected. It'll bring back that exact same map that we were looking at. So we can share the exact data we're looking at based on that. We also could share this image a lot of other ways. For instance, this image download button here, or what we call export embed, allows us to download JPEGs or PNGs based on that exact map. So it just took a picture, and here's the actual JPEG that it took, and we can insert that directly into a PowerPoint or any kind of document that we're trying to show the data that we're looking at. It takes the legend, also puts information about what we're looking. So you see all that text that we saw, all the selections, and it even notes that all the red dots are Superfund sites. So it gives you all this information in a very, very simple image. Maybe we want to download the data. Well, that's what the download icon here is for. So if I click this, it'll actually do an export of the data. And what it's actually bringing down is a comma separated file with all the years of data. And I'll go ahead and show you the zip file here, all the years of data in a data file, along with some general information in a PDF and a footnotes document. The footnotes document is our data about the data, and it's available in the download, but it's also available via this green button that says about data. And if I click that, I can find all this wealth of information about the data, how the data was calculated, where the data came from, which we always list right up front. This data is provided by the US Census Bureau, and it's the ACS survey. So you get exactly where the data is coming from. If there's a state with missing data, we're probably going to tell you why that data is missing. Maybe it's not being collected for that particular state. Maybe the survey that's collecting it decided to hold that data back because of inconsistencies with the data. We'll post that information if we have it into this about the data. Also from here, you can figure out things like how would I cite the data? Why is the data set created? How was it calculated? How do I get a copy of the data? And it'll tell you all those same questions that I've been going through, but it'll give it to you all down here to make it easier for the user. And all this information exports when you export the data file. Finally, a couple of other neat things. We talked about that API. Well, maybe you're a programmer and you're a little geeky and you want to play with the API. The Data Explorer actually will build you the exact API call. So that's what this second URL here is under share. And if I copy that and paste it, it's going to look a little geeky, I know, but if you're a developer and you're into data, you're going to understand what you're looking at is JSON data. So this actual screenshot here of all these weird numbers and titles, that's the data that we're looking at. And it can pull it to a flat file. You can directly connect to this data and display it in your own application or mobile app. This is actually our API providing all that data that you're looking at. And it's a JSON file. So it's very easy to consume and use the data. Finally, one last way to show the data is our newest way, and that's embedding this data. So if we love this map and we want to show it on another website, we can actually embed the data. Once again, we're going to go to here to this export. Instead of picking JPEG or PNG or even animated GIF, which will make a animation over time, we can actually see all these years change. We're actually going to pick data visualization embedding. And what that does is it shows us a new tool that allows us to create an embedded file of this map. We can also do that with tables and charts, and I'll show those in just a second. And from here, I can simply say, I want to embed a map because that's where I'm at, and I want to choose some different options. Do I want a title bar? And it's showing you what a title bar is. And it gives you code down here at the bottom. So if I hit preview, it's actually going to generate a preview of exactly what that embed's going to look like. We'll see it pop up here. And if I take this code and copy it and place it on my web page, whether that's a CDC page, outside CDC, another website, we're actually going to see, I'm going to paste it in this just simple HTML builder. We're actually going to see this is outside the CDC. It's building that same map we just looked at on a total other site. And all the full functionality is there. I can change the year. I can look at the about data. All that's available on the site that you embed this on. And you can do that not only with our maps, but you can also do it with our tables and charts. So if I come here, I can look at what a chart might look like. And so this will build a basic chart to start with. But just like the map, there's all kinds of additional advanced options that allows us to customize this chart. Maybe we want to look at a line graph. Maybe we want and pick a couple of counties and look at that over time. You can do that with this tool. And then finally, maybe we want to look at a table. Okay, so there's all the different chart types. We can, some are not available depending on what you've selected or what the data is. Or maybe we actually want to look at the table, the raw numbers here on the table. And from here, we can sort, we can filter, we can actually add additional columns that may be missing. So for instance, maybe it's important to see the FIPS or anything else. And then the filter allows you to sort based on show me all the states that start with AL, which is Alabama. And it could actually, so there we go. We can pick just Alabama. We can actually change anything we want to be able to show in the data from these additional tools in this functionality. So back here to the map for a second. Okay, one more cool feature to show you. You've been seeing me do everything on the left-hand side of the screen, and you've noticed there's this whole other side of the screen while I'm not using. Well, we've built the Data Explorer to allow us to explore data, but not just a single data set. Maybe it's important to look at two data sets side by side. So from here, we can do things like, I want to close this notification. I can actually copy a data set from side 1 to side 2. And what it does is it recreates that same picture on both sides. Well, why is that useful? Maybe I'm comparing years and I'm looking at 2018 on the left and 2013 on the right. And that last tool I didn't show you up here in the mapping options allows me to link the two. So now as I move over one, I get a pop-up on both. As I zoom on one, I zoom on both. So I can really get into this data and figure out what's going on between these years of data. But even more interesting than that, I could run a totally different query on side 2. For instance, let's do that now. I'm going to go ahead and run a query on COPD. So I'll pick COPD and we'll look at mortality for COPD. And I'll pick age-adjusted death rate of COPD. Geography type. Now notice different kinds of a geography here. We've got smooth data, we've got unsmooth data, we've got national by state. So since we're looking at county on the left, I'll pick county on the right, and I'll do national smooth data. We'll pick all years. And this time I do have additional advanced options. I could limit it just to male or female, or specifically by race. And since these are optional, I'll just not pick anything and it'll give me the complete numbers. So now it's built this whole different map over on the left. So now when I'm linking them, and I'll zoom out here, I'm looking at percent of population 5 years and over that speak English less than well on the left, and I'm looking at COPD on the right. And so even though I'm not saying there's a correlation here between the two, at least it lets me explore the data. And since they're still linked, as I hover over a particular county, I can see that 3.6% of this major Oklahoma county has someone that fits into that percent, but also the age-adjusted rate over here for COPD is 114.5. So it allows me to really look at two data sets side by side. And because I have the options here, I can even link the years, or maybe there's a correlation between slot 1 and 2 years later with slot 2 on the right. So it gives me this power to look at the data over time and side by side. So really neat functionality to be able to do that. And then lastly, something else, 2 short things, and then we'll let Patrick talk a little bit about our dashboards, and I'll show those off in a second. But 2 quick things that are neat to see. I mentioned setting it into motion. Well, what I'm doing now is I push the play button. I could have done this on either side, and it's going to download the data, all the data. And you'll notice it now sets this data into motion. And so it's actually showing this data advancing through time on the left. And so if I hover over a particular county, you'll notice that age-adjusted rate is changing in real time as it moves through the years. If I were to download this as an animated GIF, that's the picture I would exactly get on my animated GIF. So I would have a picture moving through time showing the data. So a really neat way to look at any data that changes quickly over time. And the last thing I want to show, just so you'll know, is if you are able to explore the Data Explorer and get into it and you have questions about it, we'll show you an email address at the end that you can write us for questions if you get into this later. But if you just need some quick help, the question mark at the top takes you some basic functionality questions. How do I do X, Y, or Z? And explain some of the stuff that I've shown today in a brief overview. And it definitely explains what all those icons mean across the top. So it's a quick way to jump into the data. And if you just want to clear and start over, that's your X. So I can clear both of these and simply select data, and it starts me over at the query panel. So all kinds of neat ways to look, dig, and explore through the data, and definitely unique ways to not only look at our data, but consume our data through the API that's available. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. I'm going to turn it back over to Patrick and let him talk a little bit about our dashboard work before I show it. Patrick?
Thank you, Shannon. Just get the slides back up. And next slide, please. We're going to talk a little bit about tracking in action now. So next slide, please, Renee. Great. As you saw, there is a lot of data to access in different ways, but tracking doesn't stop with data display and dissemination. Remember, our aim is to provide the best quality data so that people can make informed decisions about public health. Tracking's expertise, data, and tools have been used to inform decisions about allocating resources, planning interventions, evaluating efforts to protect and improve the health of communities. On the tracking webpage, and Shannon showed you this briefly at the beginning, but you can find success stories, but you can also find highlights of the many faces of tracking and also tracking in action videos that detail some of the impacts of tracking around the country. Next slide, please. At the national level, I wanted to point out a couple of examples of tracking in action. First, the CDC Melanoma Dashboard was created through a partnership with CDC's Division of Cancer Prevention and Control, and it provides a wide range of relevant state and local data to help communities address their unique melanoma prevention needs. Additionally, the Tracking's Data Explorer's time-lapse view, as Shannon just demonstrated, is an integral part of CDC's COVID data tracker and allows the public to observe rates of community transmission at the county level over time. This animated map of county-based rates of community transmission is embedded in the CDC COVID tracker website, and you'll often see it pop up in national news clips. Next slide, please. So how can tracking be leveraged for preparedness activities? Next slide, please. Understanding a population's vulnerabilities and resources helps public health professionals identify groups at higher risk and community-specific threats or hazards. Tracking data can be used in identifying households or geographies likely to be affected by a public health emergency, in determining available resources within a community, and calculating resources needed for a public health response or for public safety. Next slide, please. The data sets listed here can help provide insights into characteristics of communities and populations that may be protective or make them more vulnerable during public health emergencies. Our wildfire smoke tool displays locations of predicted surface smoke concentrations from wildfires that are layered on top of community and census tract level measures to access care and social vulnerability, health status, annual air quality levels, or population characteristics. Additionally, we have map overlays such as predicted surface smoke, current radar, transportation noise, and even active Atlantic cyclones. And we have points of interest. And Shannon showed some of those points of interest, but relevant to this topic, we have some of the examples include fire stations, hospitals, national shelter system facilities, nursing homes, power plants, and public schools. All in all, we have 17 points of interest that can be overlaid on any of the maps in tracking. Next slide, please. Tracking's dashboards bring data and important information together in one place, making it more accessible for all users. Our environmental justice dashboard features data and information on environmental exposures, community characteristics, and health burden. Factors important to understanding and addressing environmental justice issues. In addition, the dashboard can help identify barriers like limited vehicle access that make households more vulnerable during an emergency. Our heat and health tracker provides local heat and health information. Communities can use this dashboard to better prepare for and respond to extreme heat events. And finally, I wanted to highlight the CRC Simpler tool. This tool enables emergency planners to assess current capacity, potential bottlenecks, and additional resource needs to plan for population monitoring after a radiation emergency. It focuses on typical or anticipated activities that are needed to conduct population monitoring, such as basic first aid, contamination screening, decontamination, registration, and mental health counseling. So now I'll hand things back to Shannon for a more in-depth look at some of our dashboard products.
Thanks, Patrick. Going to go ahead and share again. Just let me know when you can see it.
Yep, that looks good.
Wonderful. So I want to start kind of where we left off, just to emphasize some of the tools Patrick mentioned, and then we'll jump right into dashboards. So here's that same measure I had earlier. This is the percent of population 5 and older that speak English less than very well. He mentioned some really interesting overlays that we can do, and I thought it'd be very practical to show them with all the environmental things that have been going on. So let me go ahead and pick map options. Excuse me. Pick at map options again. And we've showed the points of interest because I took a look at Superfunds, and we'll look at that again. But let's look at overlays. Patrick mentioned all these overlays. How do they actually look on the map? Well, these are external data sources that we collect and we lay on top of our map. They're all done in real time. So for instance, if we were to pick active Atlantic cyclones, we're actually able to see everything in a real-time state. And of course, right now, we're definitely looking at this Nicholas tropical storm right now, and it's showing path, and it also shows predicted path. So if we're really truly digging into the data, it may be very helpful to have underlying chloroplex data around vulnerability, and then lay on top of this these overlays of what the environment may be doing. And of course, we can see as we move around other things are leftovers from previous cyclones. In addition, since we know we've got the fires going on in California, I can actually do the same thing over here and turn on the smoke layer. And so definitely all the smoke we're seeing here, this low smoke we're seeing in California, is related definitely to those forest fires that are going on there. And we've seen it on the map for some time, but this is also in real time. So we're looking at it over time with that. And that not only do we have that as available as an overlay, we actually do have a whole measure related around it. So some really neat ways to look at those overlays. And then if you're focused on an individual community, as Patrick said, some of those points of interest may also be useful. So we mentioned here, maybe we're looking at nursing homes. Maybe we're looking at hospitals. Last summer, COVID was having a lot of issues inside meat and poultry and egg processing plants. So we brought those on as points of interest. And so I can turn those on and actually find out more details about that particular point of interest and how it's related. And if you notice, we actually still have our smoke layer on. So you're seeing the smoke overlay, you're seeing underlying chloroplex, and you're also seeing a point of interest. So a lot of great ways to look into this data and see how this data may be useful for overlaying different types of information. With that said, let's go ahead now and jump into some of the other ways to view the data. Patrick specifically mentioned our dashboards. So we've definitely got a couple of different dashboards out. Our environmental justice dashboard just recently released. He mentioned our melanoma dashboard, and we have our heat and health tracker. So I'm going to jump first into our heat and health tracker. We worked in partnership with the climate change program here at CDC to develop this. And so as I'm getting into the dashboards, I will say most of our dashboards reuse a common look and feel, as well as functionality in the middleware of the application, but each has its own unique features and different way of looking at data. For instance, the map that you're seeing here on the homepage of the Heat and Health Tracker is very unique and very specific to this, because not only are we looking at data, we're looking at two different kinds of data. So the underlying chloropleth data here, this data in the background, is average temperatures, and we're looking at a particular week. So this is September 5th through September 11th. That's the underlying temperature data, average weekly data for every county in the country. What are the big circles over top? You're actually looking at emergency department visits related to heat illness. And so we're trying to look at, is there a correlation between emergency department heat visits and the weekly temperature highs? And they're broken up by HHS regions. So these boundary lines here are the HHS regions. And so it actually shows you related to those regions, and we can actually change the week. So if we go further back into the summer, we're going to see much hotter temps and probably big jumps in those. And as you can see, big jumps in those emergency department visits related to temperature. And so this was a new feature we just added here. But the whole point of our dashboards is looking at data with a little bit different look. Maybe just a map, a table, and a chart is not always the best way to look at data. Let's show the data in a lot of formats with a lot of context around it so you can understand the data better. But all the numbers inside these dashboards are being fed from that same API. So as we update the data, the dashboards update appropriately. So we look down here and we see these numbers around these infographics, or we read contextual information or see videos. We're trying to look at different ways to display data. For instance, here's looking at max temperatures for the week of 9/14, or monthly forecast, looking at next month for forecast of number of days where we have heat exceedances, are projected into the future, or historical all the way into the past. So it gives you a lot of different ways to look at that. Also, every one of our dashboard lets you dig deeper, whether that's based on a county or a state. In this case, it is a county. We can either start by looking at a zip code, or we could enter a name. I'll pick Los Angeles County. And once we pick that, you'll notice there's this heartbeat where it's loading data. And that data load is it actually connecting to our API and bringing back information. So it's telling you in Los Angeles County, today's high temperature, 85.2. We've had 17 days above 90 degrees since the beginning of the year in Los Angeles County. Here's our temperature forecast predictions for September. The red line is the temps for the summer months for LA. The blue area is the historical averages for temps for LA. And then down here at the bottom, we actually zoom in and show you this census tract data based on exposure, number of days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and then all these demographic and community characteristic informations. And then lastly, just basically population characteristic information, break down the percent of population without health insurance, percent of population that's a minority, and then comparing that to the national median. So you kind of get a picture of how that county compares to the national median in all those different areas. And then finally, an age breakdown that'll show you information about ages. We're always adding to these. So at least twice a year, we've added stuff to this heat tracker with additional information, links back to all the data and how to find more information about the data, how the data was calculated, a link to our partners, and then finally resources to additional information about this particular data set. Let's take a look at another dashboard. So I'll jump back here to our homepage, and this time I'll pick the environmental justice dashboard. This dashboard was just released about a month ago. It's our newest in the dashboard family. It works a little bit different, but notice the look and feel is similar. It works a lot different in the fact that there is a lot of data here. Environmental justice is a very hot topic, and there's so many data sets that revolve around environmental justice that this dashboard actually pulls back a lot more of data than our previous dashboards. But once again, the same look and feel. We have infographics that give basic information, and when we talk about how that relates to you and how it relates to the rest of the country. We look at, in this case, ATSDR Social Vulnerability Index, and we work with GRASP Group in ATSDR to connect and show this. And so this shows that SVI ranking for every county, additional mapping such as minority population, median income. And one of the unique things about the EJ dashboard is you notice there's additional areas that we can't get to. It's because these areas focus specifically on a county. So in order to show this data, we really need someone to actually enter information about where they live. And so since I picked on LA before, I'll pick on LA again, and it'll jump us directly to environmental exposure. But we also have community characteristics and health burden data also available. So just like the previous dashboards we're looking at, it shows you where we're located for LA, basic information. In this case, we're looking at environmental. So we're looking at things such as PM 2.5, ozone, heat, precipitation, and flooding. We've just brought on board drought information. We're adding additional data. Probably will find its way here into the EJ dashboard as we move forward. We can also add points of interest just like you can on the Data Explorer, because this is basically a Data Explorer map. We've just slimmed down that list of points of interest to points of interest that are more specific to environmental justice. And so these can change from map to map and dashboard to dashboard. So here I'll pick landfill facilities. And so we'll get those. And of course, just like before, if I click on a single one, I'll get the address, phone number, additional contextual information if it's available for that. And if you like what you see, the link at the bottom of every map here will drive you back to our Data Explorer. So if I click on that, it's going to open our National Data Explorer, which you saw earlier, but it's going to open this specific measure at a national view and show you all the data that we may have for that. And so this is a national measure. It may take just a second to load, but we'll let it load in the background. And then next, we'll jump over to community characteristics. Notice different ways of looking at data. You also see things like, we don't want to show you an empty box, or we don't want to show you text without these numbers in them. So there's actually a spinning that doesn't always convey on Zoom, but there's a spinning icon letting you know we're connecting and grabbing data for you. So the data is always relevant and always fresh. It's not static and stored in text. If we update a data set, these numbers would instantly refresh to update the most recent data. And so we want to keep these dashboards current and modern, even though we know data typically falls behind. What the most recent data we can get is where we want to show here. Once again, looking at comparing national averages or looking at information. Here's another type of map where we're looking at percent of population based on different things. Notice how we highlight the county in red, specifically showing you where Los Angeles County is. And then a lot of data here, because at this point we're looking at census tracts. And so there's all the census tracts in LA County, which is huge. There's probably 3,000 census tracts in California alone. And then lastly, health burden. And I won't get into all these. They all have a similar look and feel, but I definitely wanted to show you what each of these look like and how each of them looks here on this dashboard. And then about the data with more information and resources where you can look up what some of the terms we use are and other particular tools that are available that we know are out there related to EJ, either within our state partners, our national program and partners, or even outside that group. We're going to link them here and provide additional context and resources to get to those. And we do that with all of our dashboards. The melanoma dashboard too, which I'm not showing today, is very similar, has that same look and feel, definitely drives people out to other content areas to take a look at. And then lastly, I want to take one more second, since I got an extra minute, and show one last tool. Info by location is a little bit different view, but once again connects to our data set. We always have people that ask the question, what kind of data do you have about me? Info by location was designed not specifically to show you all the data we have about a particular county, but to show you some national data that we have. So if I come in here and pick, we'll jump to Georgia this time. Actually, this one is fun to look at in LA, so we'll stick with LA. I'll choose that and I'll get some basic demographic information about LA County. And so you'll see it moves you down. It has that same infographic feel, something you might see on the cover of a newspaper, so you can get a better look at data, but it's all interactive. So you'll notice that the lungs here fill as I move down on the page, or the cloud floats into the city. And some of this doesn't convey as well on Zoom, but you get an idea. You saw the charts move. You look at smoking, you see the extreme heat, you'll see the dial spin and the information raise, and it'll give you all this basic information. And then also from here, you can jump back into the data by clicking Discover the Data. It'll open up that Data Explorer again and actually query the data set so that we can look at the data just like it did before. Or you can actually scroll to the bottom. Since California is one of our partners we work with, it'll actually provide a link back to California's tracking network. And their page is not only going to have consistent data and measures that we work to collect from them, but in a lot of cases, they may have individual data that's very unique to that state. For instance, New York may have rat data. Some states may have algae bloom data that are very specific to the state they live in and to the resources and the problems they have environmentally in their state. And so our local and state tracking network programs have not only the data that they share with us, but they also have special data that may be specific to California that you can look at on their state tracking networks. And so we find that very useful also and worth digging into if you're looking at a very specific state. All of them are uniquely created individually in their states as part of the partnership they deal with the national program. So that's a look inside a lot of our tools. Now, remember, all of these are connecting to that API that we mentioned at the beginning. And if that API is something that interests you and connecting to our 2.4 billion rows of data is something that interests you, we're happy to actually chat about that. In fact, I'm going to stop sharing and bring back Anna. Anna, if you could have them bring up the slide here with our email address, just so I can throw that out if someone is looking at any of our data and has any questions, comments, thoughts about the data and wants to and thinks about it after the fact. The NEPH tracking support at cdc.gov that you see there on the left-hand side of your screen, that's the email address that we would love to hear from you. We're happy to route that to the correct scientist or IT person that can help answer a question or get you started along the path of looking at or using our data, whether that's through our API or actually in our Data Explorer or one of our dashboards. That's the best connect to it. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Anna, and I think we're opening it up for some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wall, and thank you, Mr. DeWitt, for providing the audience with this important and timely information. We'll now go into our Q&A session. Please remember to ask questions using Zoom. Click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and then type in your question. Our first question is, why are some states part of the tracking program? Why are there only some states part of the tracking program?
Yeah, this is Patrick. I'll take that one. The simple answer is it's a matter of funding. We were only funded, so much from Congress, and with that limited funding, we had to do a competitive award process for states to become part of tracking. But I will say that there are other ways to get involved in tracking that aren't related, directly to that funding. We have our ASTO fellowships, for example. So yeah, come join the movement.
Thank you, Patrick. Here's our second question. Are all tracking data available at the neighborhood or census tract level?
This is Shannon. I can take that. No, as everyone probably is aware, data varies greatly. And so it really depends on the data set that you're looking at. In some cases, we have data very, very minutia, all the way down into neighborhoods. In some cases, data doesn't get any closer than state due to suppression or other reasons. And so every data set's unique. Some data sets we have complete coverage except for one state that decided that they didn't want to submit the data. And so depending on the data set, depends on the resolution of the data. Obviously, we're always working for higher resolution data. And as we attain that and we have permission to, we update that on the website. We release bills 4 times a year, and with each of those, we release content that's going to be in that. You can sign up for our email address or our email list, and we announce all of our new features and all of our new data in those emails that go out quarterly.
Thank you, Shannon. Do you give training on how to use the tracking network for small groups?
We will. We're happy to do that. I think one of the challenges that we have is that people who at first glance just take a cursory look at the tracking network don't realize how rich and deep it is in functionality and data. And so we are happy to talk about that. If you want to send us an email and work with us to set up a time, we are happy to give some training and guidance on how to use it.
Thank you. And let's see. Is there someone we can contact if we have new content or a dashboard idea?
I can take that. This is Shannon. That email address we flashed earlier, which I'm sure we can bring back up here at the end, is actually the best way. You know, we're happy. Patrick and I are happy if you want to look us up and contact us. There you go. Contact us directly. We're happy to find the right person. We're always interested in sitting down on a phone call and chatting about what you might be thinking and see if it's a good fit and how we can make it work. But if you can't remember us, that email address is definitely the best starting point to connect with the right person within tracking.
Thank you. Let's see. Do you plan to add any international data to the network? And do you work with jurisdictions outside of the United States?
This is Patrick. I'll take that question. Right now, we don't plan to add any international data to the network. However, we have in the past and will continue to do in the future work with international partners. There are quite a few other countries who have reached out to us. They've seen the work we've done here nationally and with our partners for tracking as a whole, and have said, you know, can we talk about how you guys did this? We want to do something for our own country. I know we've talked to Canada, to Australia, to European Union, and to Public Health England at different times. Yeah, we're happy. It's exciting to be able to share both our successes and our lessons learned in this journey in developing tracking, and so we look forward to doing more of that in the future.
And we do look at, this is Shannon, we do look at other types of data. For instance, we've recently added some data from Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands area, and we've also starting to look into tribal data. So not just this typical data sets you might think about with, you know, county and census tract. So that's definitely on the horizon too, although not international, but definitely of a different type.
Thank you. How often do you update the data and other content and features on the tracking network?
Yeah, I think I covered that a little bit, but we typically, outside of a normal COVID year, I guess you could say, but we typically introduce data and new functionality 4 times a year, quarterly. And so our latest version will go out next week, end of this week, early next week, which includes lots of new data, new functionality on the Data Explorer, enhancements to the API. So once a quarter, we do get a release. We typically have an email that goes out with announcement of that, and we're adding to our GitHub a document that'll show all the changes that went into those bills. And so if you want to get plugged into that newsletter, you can do it from our homepage. Either of the homepages I showed today, there's a link to sign up for that, or you can contact us directly and we can point you in the right direction.
Thank you. And what's the best way to keep up with new additions or updates to the tracking network?
Yeah, this is Patrick. The best way is to join that listserv that Shannon mentioned. Our announcements for new features and new data go out to that broad listserv. We're also developing something new as part of our data modernization efforts, and we're going to be sharing on GitHub, the CDC GitHub, not only sharing code snippets and standard processes and documentation that we use for tracking, but also we'll be sharing a log of expected changes coming up for new builds and recent changes as well. It's sort of a change log. So that's another good way to do it, other than the email, the listserv.
Thank you. And then we have just enough time for one more question, and that is, what's next for tracking?
I'll take that one as well. This is Patrick. I love this question. Thank you for asking this. What's next? It's very exciting. We are engaged in data modernization activities here at CDC, and so that is going to be a big push for us. Now, that may not be something that is seen readily outside of, for users of the tracking network, but it should help us create be more effective about creating these data pipelines. And that's one of our focuses, is to establish easier, faster, more repeatable data pipelines with all of our partners, including our other federal partners where we get environmental data like NASA and NOAA. There's a big effort for that. Additionally, there is an ongoing effort in tracking to focus more on sub-county data. You saw we did have some census tract data, but there is an effort to even go below that and get more finely resolved data into the tracking network. And finally, I'll mention a focus that we have both as an agency and as a center, as a program, and that is health inequities. And you saw our environmental justice dashboard that Shannon demonstrated. That was really the first version, a first cut of environmental dashboard. We utilized all data that we had on the tracking network via the API, as Shannon mentioned. But that was just really version 1. So we're currently collecting feedback and plan to add new data to that, new functionality based on some of the feedback that we've heard from the folks who have had a chance to use it and view it. So I think with those 3 things, we're going to be pretty busy in sort of advancing the tracking efforts.
Thank you. Thank you. Next slide, please. Today's Nexus webinar will be available to view on demand in a few days after the live webinar. You can find the video recording of today's webinar at CDC Nexus webpage at the link displayed below. Next slide, please. And thank you for joining us for today's Nexus webinar, with a special thanks to our presenters, Mr. Wall and Mr. DeWitt. If you have any additional questions, you may email them to ehnexus@cdc.gov. And again, thank you for joining us for today's Nexus webinar, and have a great day.